Hello everyone, this is Sergey from Ushanka Show again, slightly unusual format of my videos. So I'm currently working on the topic of American pop or soda in Soviet Union, and if you're interested in the Soviet Union, know a little bit of history, you probably know that Pepsi-Cola was a dominant force in the Soviet Union since 70s, so there was absolutely no other drinks available from other countries except Pepsi-Cola, just one flavor. And then at times in the 1980s we got Fanta from Coca-Cola. But apparently Coca-Cola had a chance to become a Soviet drink back in 1930s. So while I was researching this topic, because I found an interesting document, it's going to be a separate video. It was an invitation ticket for the testing of Coca-Cola. I started researching how that occurred, and apparently Anastas Mikoyan, who was like a minister of the food production during Stalin-era, then he was at power for a long time. He lasted long through Stalin, through Khrushchev, and through Brezhnev. He traveled to the United States in 1936. And I'm trying to get some information because sometimes around 1936 during his trip, he was introduced to Coca-Cola, and that's what it was, some kind of negotiations about bringing Coca-Cola to the Soviet Union. He brought other technologies like hot dogs came to Soviet Union after his visit in 1936. So while I was searching on information about his visit to the United States, there's not a lot of information. And if any of you know anything, especially relates to Coca-Cola and Anastas Mikoyan, please let me know in the comment section. So I was searching, but I stumbled on something else. So while I was searching for Mikoyan, I stumbled on so-called Moscow letter. So it looks like American journalist and writer Eugene Lyons was sending so-called Moscow letters to the United States. So he was stationed in Moscow in 1920s, 1930s. This is actually from 1929, South Bend newspaper. So that's a town down in Indiana, not far from where I live. So Eugene Lyons is another interesting character. We didn't talk about him. But while he was stationed in Moscow, he was born actually in Belarus. His parents most likely looks like Jewish. They emigrated to New York, so he grew up in poverty. He grew up quite a socialist, and then he had a complete 180 when he was sent to Moscow to report. Over the years, he became delusioned with the Soviet Russia, and he actually ended up writing a book called Assignment in Utopia. He wrote that book in 1937. I'm gonna try to find that book cheap on eBay. It's pretty pricey, at least $60. But before that, he was sending so-called Moscow letters. So I want to kind of read you that one because I found it really interesting, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so Moscow letter written in 1929 by Eugene Lyons, United Press staff correspondent. Moscow. The one crop that never fails in the new Russia, fair weather or foul, is the crop of political anecdotes. Once again, remember, I tried many times to bring a topic of how popular anecdotes were, political anecdotes, политические анекдоты were in the Soviet Union. So it looks like it goes all the way back to the 1920s. It seems indeed to prosper especially well in unfavorable weather. The Russians know better than any other people how to smile at their troubles, and every new difficulty evokes a new stock of jokes. Nor is there cause for complaint in the matter of collection and distribution of this crop. Humorous stories spread with incredible speed as soon as they are invited. A wisecrack in high places and certain to be retailed through Moscow in a few hours. The writer must warn, however, that these jokes need not be serious. They are just a good-natured exaggerations repeated by the faithful communists as well as by infidel antis. Good men, in fact, originate in communist quarters. The urge to make fun at one's own expense, psychologists have said, is altogether human. Premier Rikov himself, speaking at a party conference on the serious topic of the 5-year plan of industrialization, indulged in a witticism which is being echoed everywhere. If the great plan succeeds, he said, the Soviet Union may expect at the end of 5 years to have 3/4 of a pair of the shoes for every inhabitant. So this kind of his own joke. So we're gonna make 3/4 of the pair of the shoes for every citizen of the Soviet Union. And here we need to pause because he's mentioning Premier Alexei Rikov. So this is 1929. He's basically almost like second or third in command in the Soviet Union. So Alexei Rikov was born in 1881, and he was like a big thing back in 1930s. He ended up even being on the cover of Time magazine in 1924. He was rubbing elbows with Lenin and Stalin. He made a mistake to support a new economic policy when Stalin said we need to have it quit. So he was accused of being too right in a Bolshevik party. He was executed in March 1938. His wife was executed in 1938. His daughter was sent to Gulag labor camp and spent there 18 years. So the guy completely disappeared from the Soviet history books. By 1929, he is still cracking jokes about five-year plan. So that's kind of interesting reference there. Recent anecdotes reflecting recent conditions center around the subject of the shortage of foodstuffs and manufactured goods that never was fixed for entire 70 years of the Soviet Union. Thus, the Commissar of Trade, Anastas Mikoyan, so that's the guy I was searching for, is represented as comparing notes on his work with the Commissar of Health, Dr. Simashko. You haven't accomplished anything, Mikoyan chides his colleague. When you took office 10 years ago, there was malaria in the country, wasn't there? Well, there is still malaria. And what has your commissariat accomplished? Dr. Simashko interrupts. Mine, Mikoyan declares proudly. The situation is entirely different. When I took office, there was bread in the country, wasn't there? Well, now there isn't. There was meat then, now there isn't. There was sugar, and so on. So now this kind of smart-ass jokes, of course, that's not... Mikoyan didn't create the joke, I believe. And I just quickly looked up Dr. Simashko. It looks like he was one of the lucky commissars. I don't know if you remember, I made a video about the most dangerous job in the Soviet Union, and that's about being narcom. That was the position, Народный комиссар, People's Commissar. Instead of ministers, they had that title, People's Commissar. So Simashko died from natural causes in 1974. So we continue this Moscow letter. A popular variation of the same anecdote refers to the fight against vice. At a conference on the the question arose as to which commissariat ought to take charge of the fight. Some suggested the health department, others the Department of Education. Finally, the bright delegate chirped up. Why not turn vice over to the Commissariat of Trade? Then it is sure to disappear in a hurry. That's what happened to bread, to tea, to butter, etc. So that's jokes, anything, if something we have a problem, we need to give it to the Commissariat of Trade and they'll make it disappear just like bread and tea disappeared. Efficiency, that's something in which Moscow surpasses the whole world, according to a popular story. The city is built in one of the largest department stores in Europe, and the whole thing will be operated by a single person. How's that for modern methods? One person? The astonished innocent inquires. Yes, comes the answer, just one. He will stand at the main door and shout, There isn't anything, no goods, thank you, and don't call again. The inflation of currency, too, has its comic commentaries. Why is America the poorest country in the world? Runs a recent riddle. I give up. Because it can only afford to pay 15 to 20 cents for a Soviet ruble. Of individual authors of jokes, the most renowned in this place is, or perhaps was, Karl Radek, now in exile as a Trotsky follower. When he was first sent out to Siberia, he received from the government by mail an overcoat and a pair of galoshes. Thereupon he wires to the Central Committee of the Communist Party in the following subtly sardonic message: received overcoat and galoshes. Long live the revolution. And Karl Radek, that Eugene Lyons mentioned, also another interesting character. He was born in 1885. At that time it was called Lemberg, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Lviv, Ukraine currently. And he was another big shot in the Soviet government. Since 1923 he was actively supporting Trotsky, so of course that's a bad idea. He was one of the early waves of Bolsheviks that got in trouble. He was removed from Bolshevik party in 1927, and they gave him 4 years of exile, sent him to Siberia. Then he, a little bit here and there on the outskirts. In 1936, I guess he was restored in the party, then removed from the party again in 1936. So that's the second wave of repressions. And in 1937, he got 10 years of prison, which is kind of unusual. Usually everyone got shot in 1937, but he was killed in prison in 1939. So, and they say that Radek was quite a smartass. So he always was famous for kind of snipey comments, and I guess he didn't end up well as well. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this slightly unusual video. We'll have more comments soon. As I said, I'm working on this Coca-Cola topic, and we have another one that Bogdan is going to put together soon, hopefully. So anyway, thank you for watching Ushanka Show, and we'll talk to you soon. До побачення. Goodbye.